All right, welcome everybody back to Let's Code This. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded a video, but I do plan on doing it more frequent going forward. So in this video, we're going to build this real estate property detail page from scratch. And just a quick overview of kind of what it looks like. We have this property slider images. We have a map view, which is going to load a real interactive Google Maps, and then also a panoramic street view, which you can kind of click and drag around. And these two will require a Google Maps API, or a Google Maps API key, excuse me. And I'll have some links in the description of kind of instructions for how to do that. It's pretty easy. Scrolling down, we have like a property description here listed by real estate agent, some property statistics, another slider for homes nearby, property details, price history, neighborhood info. So pretty standard property details page, contact info, and footer. And this is going to be kind of like a previous video I did where we built a real estate homepage. I changed the style a bit on this page, but other than that, it's pretty similar to that. So if you haven't watched that video, I recommend checking that out as well. So let's get right into it. It's a pretty big page. So I'm starting here with just a completely empty folder called product detail. Well, it's not completely empty. I have a bunch of stock images. These will all be available on my GitHub. I'll leave a link to that in the description. So other than that, it's a completely empty directory. Let's pull it open with VS Code or whatever code editor you prefer to use. Let me close this. And we're going to basically create a new file. We'll call it property-detail.html. And then let's create a new folder, CSS. And then inside of the CSS folder, we're going to create a file called propertystyles.css. And that's where we're going to have all of our style rules. I'll close that file for now because we're going to get to that a little bit later on. So starting here with the property detail file in VS Code, I know that you can kind of just type an exclamation point and then hit tab, and this will kind of just paste you in some standard boilerplate HTML code. So like your HTML tag, head tag, title, body. So this is just very standard stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and update the title really quick to the address of the property. This is just a made up address, San Francisco, and then we'll say XYZ Realty Incorporated. And then we also have some libraries and frameworks we're going to be leveraging for this. So I'm going to start by copying and pasting in the CSS portion of it first. So the first one is going to be the Slick Slider plugin, and this is the CSS portion of that. There's also going to be a JavaScript component. The next thing we're going to want to do is attach our property styles CSS file into this HTML file. So let's create another link tag. Let's say rel equals style sheet, type equals text, whoops, text over CSS. Where did I get that extra quotation? href equals, and then we'll say css/propertystyles.css. Next, we're going to have jQuery, and so I'll just go ahead and copy and paste a link to the jQuery library, and this is going to help us with some stuff when we start writing our JavaScript code. Next, we're going to be using the Font Awesome library for some icons, and then the last part is the JavaScript portion of the Slick Slider plugin. So let's quickly get into the HTML here. So in the body tag, we're going to start by opening up a main tag. This is going to be kind of that entire upper section of our page. And so let's put in a header tag next. And inside of the header tag, we're going to do a div with a class of flex and container. So just to pull this back up, we're working on this header section up here, and it's a flex container because we have the logo to the left and then some links to the right. So whenever you have that kind of horizontal layout, I like to use Flexbox for that. So flex container, and then the logo. So we'll do an A tag with an ID of logo. It's not going to link anywhere. I suppose if you watched my other video, you could probably have this logo linked to the homepage. We'll say XYZ Realty, and then under that, let's open up a nav tag for the nav links. And then the first thing we'll need to do in here is, if we go to a smaller screen, and in fact, I didn't show this earlier, but this is a fully responsive page. So if I pulled it down to like the size of an iPhone, we get this hamburger menu with a flyout. So let's start working on that next. And then the rest of the page is responsive as well. So we'll get into that. But let's work on this hamburger button here. So inside of the nav tag, let's create a button with an ID of nav toggle and a class equals hamburger menu. And then inside of that, we're going to have some span tags, class of strip. And let's just copy those 2 more times. Under that, let's create an unordered list with an ID of nav menu. And inside of that, a bunch of list items. First one, well, these aren't going to link anywhere, but the first one is the home page. Let's copy that, paste. The next one was properties. And this one we're going to give a class of active. Oops, class equals active. And that's because we're working on the property detail page, so that's like you're on the properties page. So this is the active link. And then let's go ahead and copy the home link a few more times. So we had agents, about, news, contact. So agents, about, news, contact. And then let's copy this one more time because we're going to create a close button for the flyout. So let's give the list item an ID of close flyout, and we'll see why we're doing this in just a second. Let's get rid of the hyperlink tag inside. Oops. And then inside of the list item, let's do a span with a class of FAS and then FA-times. That's using Font Awesome to get us a close button icon. And that'll do it for the nav. So come down here underneath the header. Let me scroll down here. Underneath the header, we're going to create a section tag with an ID of main property. And now we're kind of moving on to this section here, and then we're going to roll into the slider as well. So inside of that section tag, let's create a div with an ID of property details, class of flex and container. We're going to use another flex box here. Inside of that, let's do div class equals address container and flex. Inside of there, we're going to do div class equals home icon. And then inside of that div, we're going to create a span, which is going to have the actual icon itself. So class equals FA-home to use Font Awesome. And that icon is this little house icon over here to the left. That's what we just kind of coded out right there. So underneath the home icon div, we'll create another div. Oops. And then inside of that, let's create an address tag. And then a strong tag, 234 Evergreen Terrace. And then underneath the strong tag, we're going to create a small tag for San Francisco, California, and the zip code. And the reason we're using strong and small is because if we take a quick look, this part is kind of larger and bold, and this is smaller. And that's kind of the exact same pattern for over here too. So we're going to use that same kind of structure for that. So underneath this address tag, let's also create another small tag here. And let's give it a class of status. And then inside of there, we'll do span, class equals for sale. And then over to the right of the span, we'll put the text for sale. And then underneath this div right here, we're going to create another small tag and give it a class of year built sm, year hyphen built hyphen sm. And then inside we'll say built 1999, listed on XYZ Realty, 9 days. And then coming down here, okay, and then let's open another div, class equals property stats container with a flex as well. Inside of there, we'll do div class equals price. Inside of there, we'll do div class equals padded inner container. Inside of the padded inner container, we're going to have a strong tag, and this is going to be for the price, which is 1.23 million. Under that, a small tag listed at price. And then let's go ahead and copy this price div, copy this whole thing, because we're going to have it kind of the exact same for beds, baths, and square feet. So I'll come down here, paste it down here, copy, paste, paste. Okay, and then let me scroll down a bit. So the next one under price is beds. So we'll change the class here to beds. And then it was 3 beds. So 3 beds. Next one is baths. Oops, so class equals baths. And then we had 2 baths. Scroll down a bit. Next one was square feet. So down here we'll say 2600. And then let's also add a small tag inside of this strong here, and we'll say square feet. And then down here we're going to put like the price per square foot. So it'll be 473 per square foot. And then underneath the square foot div here, we're going to have another small tag, class equals year built, and we'll say built 1999, listed on XYZ Realty, 9 days. And you might be thinking, we just created a tag just like this up here. So one of these is going to be visible on small screens. The other one will be visible on just regular, kind of like larger laptop or desktop screens. Okay, so underneath this closing div here, let's open up another div, class equal actions container, and then flex. And then inside of there, div class equals favorite. Now we're creating those 2 buttons over to the right. So we'll create a button inside a span with a class equals FA heart. And then underneath, we'll create a small tag and say favorite. Let's go ahead and copy this div, paste it again here, scroll down a bit. Next one was share. So div class equals share, and then it'll be FA-share. And then in here, change that to share. And that should do it for that upper section. So we just finished this top section up here, and now we're going to go into the slider. So underneath this div here, so right before the closing section tag, we'll say, let's put a comment to kind of keep things a little bit more organized. Start image slider, and then end image slider. Is we're going to have a div ID of property image slider, and then class equals slick. Inside of there, we're just going to have some div tags with an image inside of each one. So image equals, and then we're going to go into our images folder, and it was property image 1.jpg. Put some alt text, property image 1. And we had about 9 of these, I believe. And these are just stock free images that I found on, I think, unsplash.com. So let's go ahead and paste this a few more times. Let's do 3. Let's copy all 3 of these, and then we'll do so that's 6, and paste all 3 of those again. That gives us a total of 9. So now I'm going to quickly go through and just kind of update all these to property image 2, change the alt to image 2, image 3, and 9, and 9. Okay, so that's it for the image slider. Next we had the map. So I'm going to copy this comment and say start start map, end map. And this is basically just going to be a div with an ID of map. And we're going to let Google Maps do all the heavy lifting here. Same thing for the street view. So if I come down, I'll copy all 3 of those, and we'll just say start street view. And this is going to be a div with an ID of street, and street view. And that's it for that. The next thing we had is the slider options container, which was when you click, you can change the view to the images or the map or the street. So let's do a div with a class equals slider options container, and it's going to be a flex box. And let's create a hyperlink tag. So an A ID equals image view, For the href, I'm just going to put JavaScript : semicolon, and this just kind of makes it a dead link. Because when we click on it, we're going to have some JavaScript run some actions and not really like link anywhere. So inside of the A tag, let's do a div with a class of image-fade. And then inside of that, we'll create a span tag with the text images. Underneath that div, we'll have the actual image itself, image source equals images slash, and then it's image view.jpg, alt text of show images. And then again, let's just copy this whole hyperlink tag because it's going to be 2 more times. Very similar. Whoops. Copy it 1 more time. So the next one was map view. So map view, and then instead of images, we'll say map, and then it was images slash map view, and then change the alt text to show map view. And then same thing with street. So this is going to be street view, and then instead of images here, it'll be street view, and then images slash street view was the image name, and then we'll update the alt text again, so show street view. And that does it for that entire top section. So underneath our main tag here, let's open up a section with an ID of property description. Inside of there, we'll do div class equals flex and container. Inside of there, do div class equals description, and then we're going to have an h3 tag with the text overview, and then underneath of that h3 we'll have a paragraph tag, and then we're going to have a bunch of well, I'll just copy the text. It's quite a bit, so we're doing this part right here, so I'm going to copy all this. A lot of it is just gibberish text. Let's paste it inside of the paragraph, and then let's go ahead and do the word wrapping. So underneath the paragraph, or underneath this div class equals description, we're going to do a div class equals listed, listed by container, and then an h3 inside of there, and we'll say listed by. Underneath that, let's put the actual image of the real estate agent. So images slash listing agent, alt text of listing agent, Stuart Redmond. Underneath that image, we'll have a div container, and inside of there, hyperlink tag with a, it won't be linking anywhere, but let's just put the real estate agent's name in there. And the idea here is, like, if you were actually building a real estate portal, you might have like real estate agent profile pages, and this could link to this person's profile page or something like that. Okay, then XYZ Realty Inc., and then a small tag, real estate agent. And then underneath this div, we'll create a button. Button with an ID of ask a question. Ask a question. And that should do it for that part. And then really quick, I want to explain really quick. So this ask a question button, when clicked on, should scroll the user down to the contact form. So I forgot to kind of go over that earlier on. So we'll have to do that in the JavaScript a little bit later on in the video. So next section is the property info. So section ID of property info, give it a class of container, scroll down a bit, and then in here, div class equals price insights was the first section, and then h3 price insights. Underneath that, let's have a div with a class of flex. Inside of there, we'll create a div. Inside of that div, we'll create a label, and the first one was estimated monthly payment. Underneath that, we have a strong tag, and let's put in the price, $585. Let's go ahead and copy this div a few more times. I think it was 4 total. So that's 2, oops, copy 3, 4. Scroll down. The next one was price per square foot. Oops. Price per square foot, and that was 473. Next is buyer's brokerage compensation. So buyer's brokerage comp. This is 2.5%. Let's go ahead and just copy these two, the label and the strong. Let's paste them down here. Get rid of those other ones. And this one's going to be sellers brokerage comp, also 2.5%. And then so underneath the price insights div here, let's create another div with a class of home facts. Scroll down a bit here. And so really quick, we're on this section down here. So inside of the div class goes home facts. We'll have another h3 home facts. Div class equals flex. Inside of there we'll have our div list item. Label is status. And then we'll do a strong tag and then for sale. And let's go ahead and copy this again a few more times. Whoops. So 1, 2, 3, copy 4, and I think it was 5 total. So next one was time on XYZ Realty. So time on XYZ Realty, and that was 9 days. 9 days. HOA dues is next, and this one was 375 per month. And then we have year built, 1999. And the last one was community, San Francisco. Okay, and that does it for that section. So next one is going to be nearby similar homes. So let's come down here, let's open up another section with an ID of nearby similar homes. And then inside of there, a div class of container. And then H2 tag, which will be nearby similar homes. Underneath that, we'll have a div with an ID of properties slider. Class is slick, and this will be where we use that plugin to create our slider. And then we'll just do, each of the items are going to be in their own hyperlink tag because you probably want these to be clickable and go to other property detail pages. Then we'll have an image tag inside. So image source equals images / nearby property 1. Alt text of nearby property 1. Underneath that, we'll have a div with a class of property details. The first one in there is let's do a paragraph tag with a class price. And let's do, what is it, 3.4 million. Underneath that, we have a span with a class of beds, 6 beds. And let's copy this span 2 more times. So one for baths, one for square feet. So baths, 4 baths, and then square feet is 4,250 square feet. And then underneath that, we'll have an address tag. And this is 480 12th unit 14 San Francisco, California. And so let's just go ahead and copy the A tag of this whole thing. I think we have 5 total. So paste that. Oops. So copy it one more time. So that's 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to quickly go ahead and update the images. So this is nearby property 1. This one will be nearby property 2. Nearby property 2. 3, 3, 4, 4. And I think we only have 4 of these images total, so let's just reuse property image 2 for the 5th one. So let's make this nearby property 2, but the alt text we can say nearby property 5. And that should do it for that slider there. So if we come down here to the closing section tag, underneath that, let's open up another section tag, an ID of property info details. Inside of there, we'll have a div with a class of container, container, and then h2 tag, property details for 234 Evergreen Terrace. Underneath that, let's have a div with a class of flex and main details. Inside of there, let's open up a div. What is this? Get rid of that. Open up a div tag, and then inside of there we'll have a label. Inside of the label, a span with a class fa-home to get that home icon. And to the right of the span tag, let's have the text type with a colon. Underneath the label, we'll have a span, and it's a single family residence. And then let's go ahead and copy this div, this whole thing, a few more times. So copy, I think we had 5 total. So 2, 3, 4, 5. And then under type, the next one was parking. So let's change the icon to a car, fa-car, and then the type to parking. And then we'll say 2 spaces. Next one is the heating. So let's change this to a thermometer. So thermometer full. So this would be like for warmth. Change that to heating, and then it will be forced air. Forced air. Next one is lot size. We'll do fa square hyphen o, and type, change that to lot size, and the lot size is 4,200 square feet. And then finally, the last one is the cooling. So cooling, let's change the icon to thermometer empty to represent cooling. And we'll say central air. And then underneath the main details div here, we'll say h3, h3 interior details, and under that we'll have a div with a class of flex. Scroll down a bit here, and then inside of there we're going to have a div with a strong tag, say bedrooms and bathrooms. Underneath that, let's have an unordered list, because we're going to have a list of items. So then one list item will be bedrooms 3. Let's copy that 2 more times and say full bathrooms will be 2, and then 1/2 bathrooms will be 1. And let's copy this whole div a few more times, because the other items are going to be very similar, and I think we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total. So let's go ahead and copy this 3 more times. So 3, 4, 5. And so under bedrooms and bathrooms, the next one is appliances. So appliances. And we only have 1 list item here, so let's get rid of those other 2, and we'll say appliances included dryer, washer, refrigerator, freezer, garbage disposal, microwave, range oven, and dishwasher. The next one down here is basement. Again, we'll just have 1 list item, and we're going to say none. There is no basement. Let me scroll down a bit here. Under basement is flooring. So flooring, and then again, just 1 list item, and that'll be flooring, hardwood, laminate, carpet. And then next one is other interior features. This will be fireplace, and bonus room. Delete that last list item there. And then, so underneath the underneath this div with the class of flex, we're going to have exterior details. So come down here, and we'll do h3 exterior details, div class equals flex. Open up a div tag, and then a strong tag, and say parking. Underneath that, we'll have an unordered list. So this is very close to what we did up above. Probably could have just copied and pasted. So the first one is attached garage. Paste that down there, and then the next one will say garage spaces 2. And let's copy this div again. So this whole list item here, or this whole div, which is one of our flex items. So for this section, I think we only have 3 items. So let's just paste that one more time. So 1, 2, 3. Next is lot. So lot, and we just have one list item there, and it is lot size 4,200 square feet. Next is property, and we'll say stories 2 and exterior features stone and wood. Let's copy and paste. And the third one here will be fencing, fenced yard. And then next we have construction. So just to give you guys an idea of where we're at right now, is we're down here. So we're doing all this here. So interior details, exterior details, and construction. So construction details, we can basically copy and paste exterior details. It's almost the exact same thing. So let's go ahead and do that. So starting from this H3 tag here, let's copy all the way down to this closing div, which is the closing of this div class equals flex. So copy all of that, and then we'll paste it underneath this flex. Oops. And then instead of exterior details, we'll say construction details. And then the first one was type and style. So we just have one list item, and that is single family. And then the next one was condition. And the condition is new construction. We'll say no. And then year built, 1999. And then we can basically just get rid of this last div item here, or last flex item. And then that should do it for that entire section. Okay, so the next part we're going to be doing is the price history. So let's do section ID equals price history. And inside of there, we'll do a div with a class of container. Oops, div class equals container. And then an H3 tag will say price history. And then underneath that, let me scroll down a bit here. We'll have a div with a class of price history container. Inside of that, div with a class of flex and header row. And then really quick, so the part we're working on now is this price history table. So this is the header row up here. And then these are each of the rows. These are all going to be their own flex boxes. So inside of the flex header row, let's do a span with date, and let's copy and paste that 2 more times. And the next one will be event, and then price. And then underneath this header row div, we'll do a div with a class of flex. Inside of there, let's do a span, and we'll say 6/26/2020. And then paste that 2 more times. And the next one will be price change. And then let's put a price in there. So 1.23 million. And then inside of there, right after the text, let's have an I tag with a class of price. Oops, class price change, and this will be a decrease. And so inside of here, we'll do in parentheses negative 3.6%. That's how much the price decreased from the previous listing price. Let's copy this entire div here and paste that, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the next one is 6/19, 2020, and this was going to be listed for sale. And then we'll put the original price, which was 1.275 million. And this also has a price change, and it's an increase. And we'll say, so plus 28.6. 28.6%. The next one we'll do 4/11/2015, and this is sold, and it was sold originally for 910,000. So 910,000. And let's get rid of this entire I tag in here. So just the span. And then next under that is, let me scroll down a bit here. The next one will be 1/29/2015. This is a price change, and it's going to be 910,000. And this was a price decrease, negative 4.2%. And the last one we'll do 11/19/2014. And this is going to be listed for sale. And so it was listed for sale back then at 950,000. Let's get rid of this entire I tag once again. So just the span. And that should do it for the price history. So the next part is the neighborhood info. So underneath the section tag here, we'll open up another section, ID of neighborhood. And then inside a div class of container. And inside of there an H2, and we'll say neighborhood. And then a div with a class of walk score container. And then inside of there a div. Inside of there a span class equals FA hyphen walking to get that icon. And then underneath this span tag here, we'll say strong tag and then walk score. And then after the strong tag, let's have a hyperlink. Inside of there, we're going to do 10. And then outside of the hyperlink tag, we'll do /100. And then an I tag at the very end, and we'll say this is car dependent. It has a very low walk score, right? And the idea here is that you could have a hyperlink to some like walk score report regarding this property. Let's copy this div and paste it down below, and the next one will be transit. So change the icon to FA-bus, and then change walk score to transit score. And the transit score is even worse. It's a 9 out of 100. So we'll say minimal transit. And then so after the walk score, we have the school ratings. So underneath the walk score container, underneath this div here, we'll create an H3 tag. We'll say school ratings. Underneath that, let's have a div with a class of school ratings container. Inside of there, we're going to have a div. Inside of there, another div, class of rating, and then good. And then we'll put the actual rating inside of a span, so 8, and outside of the span /10, so 8 out of 10 for this school. Then with underneath that, we'll have a div with a class of school info, and then open up another div, hyperlink, doesn't link anywhere. The idea would be if this school had a website, you could have a link to it or something like that. So ABC's elementary. Underneath that, let's create a span. It's a grades, and then a strong tag, and this is PK through 6. And then let's go ahead and copy and paste the grades one more time, because this is going to be distance. It'll be almost the exact same DOM structure, and it'll be 0.4 miles. And then we can go ahead and copy this whole div here 2 more times. We have 3 schools total, so let's paste it down here. Whoops. Copy, paste. And the next one was a rating of medium. So we'll change good to medium. This one got a 6 out of 10. And this is Acme Junior High School. So Acme Junior High School. Grades are 7 to 9. So 7 to 9. Distance is 0.5 miles. Let me scroll down a bit here. The next one is a good rating, so it's a 9 out of 10. And it is Pi Squared High School. The grades are 10 to 12. 10 to 12, and the distance is 2.4 miles. And that should do it for the neighborhood info. So underneath this section tag, let's create another section tag. And this is the contact form. So ID of contact, inside div class equals container. Inside of there we'll have an h2 contact. Underneath, let's do div ID equals form container. So this will have the actual contact form. So h3 contact the listing agent. Underneath that, the actual form tag itself. We'll have a label, and the first one is a name, so for equals name, name. Underneath, an input, type equals text, ID equals name, and then let's copy and paste the label and input a few more times. So we had name, email, phone, and then message. So let's go ahead and start updating these. So then this one is an email, email. Next one is phone, phone, and message, message. And this, instead of the input here, we're actually going to need a text area. Let me scroll down. So let's get rid of that. Let's do a text area. ID equals message. And we'll just say I'm interested in purchasing 234 Evergreen Terrace in San Francisco, California. And that'll kind of pre-populate that with this text here. And then the user can kind of just overwrite that with something else if they care to. Let's do a button with a class of rounded, because we have a contact agent button. So contact agent. And that'll do it for the contact section. So the last piece we have is the footer. So scroll down here a bit. Underneath that, let's create a footer tag. In there, we'll have a div with a class of flex container. Inside of there, a div with a class of footer about. So that's that first part on the left side of the footer. So h5 tag about XYZ Realty Inc. And then we have a paragraph tag, and then I'm going to go ahead and come back to the prototype here, scroll down to the footer. Let's just copy all this gibberish text here. So we'll just copy that. Feel free to put whatever you like in there. Okay, and then next piece, underneath the footer about, we'll create another div with a class of footer quick links. And then h5, and we'll say quick links. Underneath that, an unordered list, and then some list items. Get rid of that last part. So inside the list items, we'll have hyperlinks that don't go anywhere. So hashtag, and then the first one was about us. Copy and paste that a few more times. Next one was services. And the next one is testimonials. Next one was contact us. Okay, and then underneath the footer quick links div, we're going to do another div. Let me scroll down a bit here. Maybe div with a class of footer subscribe. And then h5, and inside of there, subscribe to our newsletter. And then div id equals subscribe container. And then inside of there, we'll have an input. We'll have a input, the type of text. Placeholder equals enter email. Button with a class equals right rounded. And send. And close the button tag. Close the button tag. Okay, and then so underneath the subscribe container div here, we're going to have another h5 with a class of follow us. And I'll just say follow us. Let me scroll down a bit here. And then underneath that, an unordered list tag, and then some list items with hyperlinks that don't go anywhere. And we're going to have icons. So span class equals FAB, FA, Facebook hyphen F. And that gives us that Facebook icon using font awesome. And let's copy this 3 more times. Oops. Yeah, just so 4 total. The next one is going to be Twitter. So FA hyphen Twitter. Next one will be Instagram. FA hyphen Instagram. And then FA hyphen LinkedIn hyphen in. And that should give those icons. And then the last piece is the copyright. So right before the closing tag of the footer, we'll have a small tag. Inside of there, we'll say copyright. So then ampersand copy semicolon to get that copyright icon. 2020 all rights reserved. I'll have a pipe and then say XYZ Realty Inc. And that's it for the HTML. All right, so let's go back to our folder here and let's take a look at what our work in progress looks like. So I'm going to pull it open in Chrome here, and there it is with just the HTML all by itself. So you can see it looks pretty ugly. So let's start to work on the CSS so that we can make it look like this. So come back over here. Let's open up property detail.css, and the first thing that we're actually going to do is we're going to need to import a custom font. So I'm going to go back into Chrome and let's open up Google Fonts. So fonts.google.com, and go head up here in the search and we'll type in Roboto. Here it is here. So we'll click on that and we're going to pull out the regular 400. So over here to the right, click select this style, and that's going to kind of add it over here. And then we can go add more styles. Go back to the search. And then the other one that we're going to search is called Playfair Display. So here it is here. So Playfair Display, click on that. We're also going to get the regular 400. Click select this style. And then over here on the right, it should have added them. So click on embed and then click at import. And this is what I find is kind of the easiest way to just put it directly in your style sheet. So we'll just copy all this in between the 2 style tags. So go ahead and copy that. And then coming back over, we'll just paste it in here. So we're going to start by importing that custom font from Google Fonts. And then next we'll just do start global styles. And we'll start with the body tag. And we'll say font family. And let's use that custom font, Roboto, and then with a Helvetica and then a sans serif backup, and we'll say margin 0, padding 0. That's going to kind of just remove that default spacing. Font size 1 rem globally. Global font weight 400. Color 444, which is kind of a dark gray. And it'll set the global line height to everything to 1.7. And then we're going to target every single element with the star, and we'll say outline none. And that'll get rid of those really annoying outlines that are default. Next, we're going to have to do something for our slick slider plugins. So this is going to be kind of weird, but we're going to say anything that is not have the class of slick track without the class of slick list, we're going to set to have a transition of 0.4 seconds. And that kind of gives this animation effect to all elements except our sliders. So that's necessary there. Next, we'll target all of the containers. And we'll say max width of 1140 pixels. And then we'll do margin 0 auto, which is basically just going to space them out horizontally in the middle of the page. And then padding 0.20 pixels. So that's 0 on the top and bottom and 20 pixels on the right and the left. For all of the elements that have a class of container. And then all the flex containers, we'll do display flex and justify content as space between. Let me scroll down a bit here. And then next we'll target all of the headers. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5. Oops. And we'll say margin 0, padding 0. Okay, and then just the H1s and the H2s, we're going to use that other custom font. So font family Playfair display and a backup of just serif. And these will have a font weight of 800, line height of 1.2, and then moving down to just the H1s by themselves, we'll say font size 3 rem, margin bottom 1 rem, and then just the H2s by themselves, font size 2.5 rem, color will be that primary color, the 008EEF, the light blue, margin bottom of 3 rem, and then just the H3s. Scroll down a bit here. We're going to be font size 1.4 rem, excuse me. Font weight 300. Border bottom 1 pixel solid, #999. Margin bottom 1 rem. The H4s are going to be font size 1.2 rem. Font weight 300, and then the next are the H5s. These will be font size 1 rem, and then we'll also use that custom font. So font family Playfair display, backup of serif. In the paragraph tags, we'll say margin 0 on the top, 0 on the right and the left, and then 1 rem on the bottom. Next, we'll do the buttons with a class of rounded. So background will be 008EF. Get rid of the border. Set the font color to white. Font size to 16 pixels. Border radius 30 pixels to give it that rounded look. And then the padding 10 pixels on the top and the bottom and 30 pixels on the right and the left. Line height 1.5. And then the cursor pointer. Scroll down here a little bit. Next we'll just target the section tags, and these are just going to have a margin bottom of 2 rem. And that'll do it for our global styles. So I'll say end global styles. Oops. And then start header styles. And let's just do an end header styles down below, and then we'll do all the CSS for the header stuff. So let's target the main tag, and we'll say padding top of 72 pixels. And this is kind of random, right? Why is it 72 pixels? Well, if we scroll down, we can see that this header kind of just floats with us as we scroll. And so once we scroll all the way to the top, we have to add some extra padding to push all this content down below the header. If we didn't do that, then this would float up and go behind this floating header, and we wouldn't be able to see any of this content. So that's the idea there. Okay, so next let's target the header tag all by itself, and we'll say padding, padding 0.5 rem, set the background to white, box shadow, we'll give it a 0, -4 pixels, 10 pixel, 1 pixel, and then #999 for a very light gray, and we'll give the height 72 pixels, and that's kind of corresponding to how much spacing we have to apply to push the other content down below this. So it has to be equal to the height of this element. So this is our floating header, right? And so that's the idea there. Okay, and then we'll do box sizing border box, set the top position to 0, set the position to fixed, and that's so it kind of sticks up there as we scroll, and the width to 100%, and the z-index to 3. Scroll down a bit here. Next, let's target the unordered list inside of the header tag, and we'll say list style type is none. That's to get rid of those default bullets. And then let's target each of the list items inside of that unordered list, and we'll say display inline block, and that's so that they'll sit to the left and right of one another. And then margin 0, 15 pixels. So 0 margin on the top and bottom and 15 pixels on the right and the left. Next, we'll target the link or the link tags inside hyperlinks. And we'll say color to black, font size to 16 pixels, and text decoration none. That's going to get rid of the default underline that browsers give hyperlinks. Next, we'll do the hover and active styles. So lia.active. So if you hover over these hyperlinks and also the one that currently has a class of active, we're going to change the color to that primary blue that we had, 00AEEF. And then next, let's work on the logo. So hashtag logo. Let's set the font family to our custom Roboto with a Helvetica sans serif backup. Font size to be 1.7 rem. Font weight 800. Color hashtag 000 black, and text decoration also none to get rid of the underline. Position is relative, and then we're just gonna push it down by 4 pixels, so top 4 pixels. And that kind of just pushes it down just a little bit to line up with the other items in the header a little bit better. Next, let's work on the hamburger menu. So we have that for mobile screens or smaller screens. So class of hamburger menu, so dot hamburger menu. Background color is going to be transparent, and we're going to set a border on it of 1 pixel solid and black, and then padding 3 pixels on the top and the bottom and 5 pixels on the right and the left, width of 30 pixels, cursor pointer, margin top 10 pixels, and by default it's going to be hidden, so display none. And then when we do our media queries, we'll set it to be visible. Next is going to be the strip tags, or the span tags with a class of strip inside of the hamburger menu. We'll say display block. We'll give them each a height of 1 pixels, background color black, and margin 4 pixels on the top and bottom, 0 on the right and the left. And then finally, the close flyout. So this is that close kind of X button that you can click to close that flyout menu. This by default is going to not be visible. On smaller screens it will be visible, so display none by default. That does it for the header styles. So next we'll do start main property styles, and copy that and just say end main property styles. And so now we're kind of working on this section here. So first things first, let's target the property details. So there's an ID of property details, and we're just going to give it some padding. So we'll do 1.75 rem on the top, 20 pixels on the right and the left, and 0.5 rem on the bottom. And then next, let's target all of the strong tags inside of the property details. So property details strong, and these are going to have a font size of 1.2 rem. Let's do display block and give them a line height of 1. And these are all these bold tags up here. So like the first part of the address, the price, the beds, baths, and the square feet. That's what we're doing with the strong tag here. Next, let's target the small tags. So property details small, and we'll say font size 0.85 rem, so it's going to be a little bit smaller, and font weight of 300. Next, property details, let's work on that home icon, which is on the very top left, and we're going to say margin right of 5 pixels, font size of 40 pixels, make it quite large, and give it the color of our primary color, 00AEEF. Next, we'll do the, actually, let's go ahead and copy this style up here. So copy that, paste it down here, and we're going to target the FA inside, which is that thing with a class of FA, which is the actual icon itself. We'll say position relative, and then bottom of 10 pixels. And this kind of pushes it up a little bit by 10 pixels, and that will help align it with the address a little bit better. So next is the address container itself. So we'll do property details, address container. So we'll do flex 0035%, and then justify content flex start. Next, we'll do property details, address container, year built SM. This is that year built element that's only visible on small screens. So we're going to say display none by default. Next, we'll do property details, address. This is the address tag itself. And set the font style to normal because the address tag by default makes the font style italic. And then line height 1.1. And then next we'll do property details, the status for sale. And that's going to be that round green kind of tag. So let's do display inline block. We'll give it a background of just green. Border radius 20 pixels, make it rounded, width 15, height 15 pixels, margin right of 1 pixel, a little bit of spacing, and then position relative, and then push it down by 3 pixels from the top. Let's scroll down a bit here. So the next thing is the property stats container. It's still in our property details tag, and then property stats container. And this is going to be justify content, flex start, and then flex wrap of wrap. And this is basically saying if the elements take up more than 100% of the horizontal space, then we're going to go ahead and allow them to wrap to the next line. And the reason for that is if we pull this back up, this is what we're working on right now. And we can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flex items in this flex container, and we want the first 4 to be all in one row, and then we want this last item to wrap down below, and that's kind of how we're going to accomplish that by doing flex wrap of wrap, and then we're going to set the width of that last element to be 100%. So let's do that right now. So property details, property stats container, year built, and that's that last flex item. So we're going to do flex of 0 grow, 0 shrink, but 100% of the flex basis, which is basically kind of like the width of it. And then we'll push it to the right a little bit by giving it a left margin. That kind of pushes it away from the left. And that should accomplish what we want there. Next, property details, property stats container, and then the padded inner containers. We're going to give those all a border left, 1 pixel, and then solid, and then 444. Give that light gray, and then padding 0 on the top and bottom, and 0.5 rem on the right and the left. Line height of 1.1, and text align of center. And what we're doing here is basically putting a little bit of spacing in here, and then giving all of these things this left border to kind of give it that like demarcation point. And then we're going to have to get rid of the left border on this first element so that it doesn't look weird. So that's what's going on there. So then we can do that first element. So it's property details, property stats container, and it has a class of price, right? This first item here has a class of price. So we're going to just target that one. And then its padded inner container should have a border left of none to get rid of that border left that we added to it up here. And that's going to give us the result of they all have a left border except this first one that has a class of price, right? There's a few other ways that you could have done this, but this is, we already have this class name, so why not use it? Next would be the actions container. Let's go ahead and continue to scope all of these style rules inside of the property details parent container, just to be extra safe, justify content, flex start, and then property details, actions container, and then all of the immediate child div tags, right? So this greater than sign is like target all of the div tags that are just immediate children of the actions container, not grandchildren, not great grandchildren, just immediate children. And all of those are going to be text align center. Now let's scroll down here a bit, and I'm going to go ahead and just copy this so I stop having to type it each time. So copy these rules, copy it a few times. The first one, so property details, actions container, button. So let's target all of the buttons. Let's clean this up a bit really quick. So buttons are going to be background transparent, border, 1 pixel solid, and then 999. Display block, padding 0.5 rem, 1.25 rem, cursor pointer, font size 18 pixels, and then color 444, that light gray. Scrolling down a bit here. Next we'll do the actions container share button. So just the button tag within the container that, or the element with a class of share. This is going to be border left of none. So similarly to what we did above, we added this border to both of the buttons, but we want to remove it on the left side of one of the buttons. Okay, and then next we're going to do actions container button, and then on hover of the buttons, we're going to add a background of DDD, which is a very light, super light gray, almost like a white color there. And that'll give it that hover style. And that's it for the main property styles. Next we'll do image slider styles. So end image slider styles. So the first item is just property image slider. And then with a class of slick slide inside of that, we're going to say margin 0, 3 pixels. And that's going to kind of give some spacing in between each of those images. Just a little bit of spacing there. Next, property image slider dot slick slide, and then the image tags themselves inside of those, we're going to say a height of 450 pixels. And that's going to kind of give the overall height of this to 450 pixels. And on smaller screens, we're going to bring that down a bit. So height 450. Opacity we'll set to 0.75, and then we're going to add a filter, which is a blur of 2 pixels. And so what we're doing here is basically to all of the images, we're going to set this kind of like a blur and opacity, and then only to the one that's currently in the middle here, we're going to undo that blur. So that's what we're doing there. So then let's get rid of that blur on the one that is active. So property image slider dot slick slides dot slick center image. And so what's going on here is we're targeting now just the one image that is in the center of the screen, and the plugin automatically applies a class name to that of slick-center. So that works out. So we can set the opacity back to 1 so it's completely viewable, and then remove that blur. So just set the blur to 0. Next, property image slider, and then we'll do the slick prev, and then let's just copy that, and then slick next. And these are the previous and next buttons. And then we're going to say for these display blocks, let me scroll down a bit. So display block, and then background, RGBA 255, 255, 255, and then opacity of 0.85. Whoops, 0.85. Padding 10 pixels on the top and bottom, and 7 pixels on the right and the left. We'll set the position to be absolute, so we can kind of position those to float on top of the images. Bring it down by 50%, excuse me, not pixels, 50%. And then margin top of a negative 25 pixels. Font size 30 pixels, and then color will be the 008EEF. z-index of 2. Okay, next we're going to do just the next button. So let's copy that. So slick next is going to be right of 0 because we got to bring the next button all the way to the right side of the screen, and the previous button stays over on the left. Next, let's do the slider options container. We'll give it a margin top of 3 pixels. And so what we're doing now is these 3 little boxes down here. All right, and then next we're doing slider options container, and then all of the immediate link tag children, and then we're going to give each of those a flex of 0, 0, 33% width, position relative. Next, slider options container, and then all of the images will be width 100% of their container, and then display block. Scroll down a bit here. Next thing, we're going to do the image fade. So slider options container, and then with a class of image fade, we'll say position absolute, width 100%, height 100%, because this is going to cover that entire image. Top 0, left 0, background RGBA. We'll do 0, 0, 0, which gives it a black background, and then 0.5 opacity. And then slider options container, image fade, and then on hover we're going to increase the opacity to make it a little bit darker on hover. 0, 0, 0, and then 0.65 opacity. Coming down here, next we'll do slider options container, image fade, and then the span inside of the image fade is the actual text. And so we're going to align that in the center. So text align center, position absolute, spaced 1 rem from the bottom of the container. Color will be white, width 100%, display block, and font size 1.4 rem. And that should do it for the image slider. And so next we have the map. So I'll say start map and street view styles, and this is going to be a very small block of styles, but we'll still put it in the comments. So start and end. Basically it's going to be the container with the ID of map and the ID of street. And these are going to be hidden by default. And then height of 450 pixels to match the image slider height as well, and a width of 100%. That's basically it for those. And we'll see how those are going to work a little bit later when we do the JavaScript. Next, we'll say start property description styles and end. And so in here, property description, the class of description. This is going to be flex 0, 0, 75%, so 75% width. And then property description listed by container will be flex 0, 0, 22%. So it'll be a little bit smaller. And so what we're doing here is we quickly go back. That's this container and this listed by container over on the right side. That's what these two are doing here. So next, let's just do let's copy this listed by container so we don't have to retype it. And then it's going to be image inside of there. So image with 100%. And then let's go ahead and paste that again. And this time we'll target the hyperlink, so the A tag. And that's going to be, color, which is that light blue, 00AEF. Text decoration of none. And then we're going to target the small tag inside of there. So once again, we'll copy and paste that one more time, and then target the small, so small. And this one is going to be color hashtag 777, a very light gray. Set it to display block, line height of 1. Let me scroll down here. Next, so one more time we'll paste that in, and this time we're going to target the button. So listed by container button, and then the background is going to be 00AEF, that blue color, border none, color white, width 100%, display block, padding 0.5 rem, text align center, cursor pointer, font size 18 pixels, and margin top of 1.5 rem. That should wrap up the property description styles. So next we have the property info styles. So I'm going to copy this. Oops. Say start. Start property info, end property info styles. And then so first we're going to target the container, or the element with a class of price insights, and that's going to be margin bottom 2 rem. And then property info, all the flex containers in there, we're going to say flex wrap of wrap, margin bottom 2 rem, and justify content flex start. Let's bring this down. Next, property info flex, and then all of the flex boxes immediate div children, we'll say flex of 0, 1, 25%. So that's once again, this is flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. We'll say display flex because we're going to have flex boxes inside of the flex box, so it's like nested flex boxes. So justify content space between, margin 0 on the top, 3.5 rem on the right, 2.5 rem on the bottom, 0 on the left. And that should do it for property info styles. Let's copy that comment for the next section. We'll say start nearby similar homes. Nearby similar homes styles. Copy that, and nearby similar home styles. And this is that other slider that we have. So nearby, so the element with a ID of nearby similar homes. Say margin 4 rem, 0, 6 rem. Position relative, and then nearby similar homes, and all the containers also, position relative. Okay, now I'm going to copy this down here because we're going to target the before pseudo element in here. So container colon before. Give it a content of a slash because that's what we want to appear on the page. Position absolute, right 80 pixels, top 18 pixels, and then color of 999. Let's scroll down here a little bit. And what we just did right there with that before tag is this. If I scroll down to the slider here, it's this little slash here. So that's kind of using this CSS3 trick, if you will. Next is properties slider, all of the hyperlink tags in there. We'll say text decoration none, so that they don't have any highlights. Let's get rid of one of those semicolons. And then properties slider a.slick arrow, and that's going to be those previous and next buttons. So color 000, position absolute, top negative 78 pixels. So bring those way up. Right 0, text transform uppercase, and then letter spacing 0.1 rem. And then let's go ahead and just copy this, paste it down here, and then scroll down a bit. And so now we're going to do the slick dash prev for the previous, and say right 80 pixels, and then properties slider dot slick slide. So all of those slider elements, we're going to say padding 0, 15 pixels. So 15 pixels of padding on the right and the left of each of those. And then properties slider, all of the images, we'll give them a width of 100% and width of 100% and display block. Next, properties slider with a class of properties details, padding 1 rem. Scroll down here. Next, properties slider, a class of price, and that'll be font size 1.2 rem, color 343 A40. That'll give us that kind of darker gray color. Font weight of 800, margin 0.5 rem and 0. And just to keep you guys abreast of where we are, we're kind of working on this little content area down here for each of these slider items. So that was the price. Next is properties slider, property details, and then all the span tags. Font size 0.8 rem for those. Color 444 light gray, padding right of 15 pixels. Bring that down. Next is properties slider. I'm actually going to copy this a few more times, so just copy properties slider quite a bit so we don't have to keep typing it. So properties slider, property details, span with the class of baths. We'll say padding left of 10 pixels. The next one is going to be property details span dot square feet. We'll say padding right of 0 pixels, or sorry, padding right of 0 and padding left 10 pixels. Next one is going to be properties slider, property details span dot beds, and then go ahead and copy and paste that because we're also going to grab span dot baths on one style rule. So for these two, we're going to say border right 1 pixel solid 888 for a light gray border. Next will be property details and the address tag. Font size 0.8 rem, font style normal, margin top 0.5 rem, and color 444. Bring this down a bit. All right, and that should do it for this part. So we can actually get rid of these other two things that we copied. So delete those. I'll go ahead and copy that comment. And so the next section is going to be property details styles. So start and end. And then we'll do property info details, all the flex containers inside of there. Margin bottom 2 rem. Flex wrap of wrap, justify content of flex start, and then property info details dot flex dot main details, so just that top container. We're going to give it a width of 60% and justify content space between. Let me bring this down a bit and then let's go look at what we're working on. So if we quickly go back to the prototype, we're working on property details here. So we just kind of targeted this first container and constrained the width to 60% so that this wouldn't spread 100% of the width, so that it kind of looks a little bit better. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and copy this because we're going to be typing this quite a bit. So let's paste that a few times. So the first one here is going to be property info details dot flex, and then all of the immediate div children. And those will be flex of 0, 0, 30%, margin bottom of 1 rem, margin right of 2 rem. Okay, and then next we're going to do property info details dot flex dot main details, and then all of its immediate div children. And those are going to be flex 0, 0, 40%. And then we'll do display flex, justify content space between, and margin bottom 1 rem. And then the next one will be all of the label tags inside. And those will be font weight of 600. And let's go ahead and copy this last one more time down here. And then we're going to do all of the icons inside of the labels. So target all those, and we're going to give those a color of 00AEF, that blue. Margin right of 5 pixels. Let me bring this up a little bit. position relative, top 2 pixels, font size 1.6 rem, width 30 pixels, text align center. And that should do it for that section. So moving on, let's say the next section is going to be the so start price history styles. Price history styles and price history styles. And then before we get going on this, let's just take a look at our work in progress and see kind of how it looks as we build. So I forgot to reload. So this is what it looked like before when we didn't have any CSS. So if we do a refresh here, so we can see it's coming together a little bit. We still need to add some JavaScript to make the slider come alive, and there's still quite a bit we need to do. But okay, so for the price history styles, so the first one is price history container. That'll be border 1 pixel, solid, and then CCC for light, very light gray. Price history container, all the flex boxes, and those will be justify content, flex start, margin bottom 1 rem, padding 0.25 rem, 0.25 rem, so on the top and the right, and 0.25 rem on the bottom, and 0.75 rem on the left. Next, price history container dot flex dot header row. And so now we're targeting, if we come down here, the price history, this is the header row here, the date, event, and the price. That's what we're working on right now. So flex dot header row, background, RGB, 242, 250, and 255. Border bottom 1 pixel solid, hashtag CCC, and then margin bottom 1 rem. Next is price history container, flex, and then all the immediate span children inside will be flex of 0, 0, and 25% flex bases, or the width. And then price history container dot price change. And that's going to be a font size of 0.85 rem, so a little bit smaller. And then we had an increase and a decrease, right? So price history container dot increase. This is going to be a color of dark green. And then price history container dot decrease will be a color of dark red. And that should do it for the price history styles. So next section is neighborhood. Neighborhood. Copy that, and then end neighborhood styles. So first was the walk score. So walk score container, margin bottom of 4 rem. Let me just bring that down a bit. Next, walk score container, and then all the immediate div children. We're going to say display flex, turn those into flex boxes, and then justify content flex start, margin bottom 1 rem, and then next walk score container, and then all of the icons. So .fa, font size 1.6 rem, margin right 10 pixels, position relative, top 2 pixels, width 30 pixels, and text align center. Bring that down a bit. Next is the walk score container, and then all the strong tags. So we'll give those a margin right of 5 pixels, flex of 0, 0, 130 pixels. And then next we'll target the hyperlinks. So walk score container A, font size 1.3 rem. The color will be that blue 00A EEF. Line height 1.3 and text decoration none. Next will be walk score container A, and then on hover we're going to say text decoration, and then we're going to bring the underline when they hover over it. Next will be walk score container I, so all of the I tags, margin left of 5 pixels. Let me scroll down a bit. Next will be Next is the school ratings. So we're done with the walk score. So school ratings, school ratings hyphen container, and then all of the immediate div children. We're gonna turn those all into flex boxes. Justify content, flex start, and then margin bottom of 1 rem. Okay, and the next is school ratings container, and then the element with a class of rating. So we'll do a flex of 0, 0, and then a 40 pixel flex basis, and then the border radius, because it was a rounded circle, so we'll give it a 40 pixel border radius, padding of 15 pixels, margin right of 15 pixels, and then the color was white. So next, school ratings container, rating dot good. So the rating with a class of good, we're going to say background dark green, green for good. Let me scroll down a bit. Let's just go ahead and copy this 2 more times for medium and poor. So rating dot medium is going to be background dark orange, and then poor is going to be background of dark red. Okay, and the next school rating container dot rating, and then the span inside of the rating, we'll say font size of 1.4 rem. Next, school rating containers dot school info, and then the hyperlinks inside, we're going to give it that blue color, 00AEF, and then a font weight of 600. And then finally, school rating container, school info span, and that's going to be a margin right of 10 pixels. And that ends the neighborhood part of the page. So let's bring this down, and let's copy the comments. The next is the contact form. So I'll say start contact styles, and contact styles, so that we have the element with an ID of contact, margin bottom 0, background is going to be F8, F9, FA, padding will be 4 rem, 0, 8 rem. Okay, next we have the form container. That'll be a background of white, padding 3 rem, and box sizing border box. And then inside of there, we had the H3. Give that a color of black. Font family, we'll use that custom Playfair display with backup of serif. Margin bottom of 2 rem. Bring this down a bit, and then form container, all the labels inside will be display block, color black, margin top 1 rem. Next, form container input, and form container text area. So there's going to be all those input elements. We'll say those are all display block, border radius 20 pixels to give the rounded corners, padding 10 pixels, border 1 pixel solid, CED for DA, width 100%, box sizing border box, and height 43 pixels. We'll use our font family of Roboto, the custom font with a backup of Helvetica and sans serif. Font size, of 1 rem. Let's scroll down a bit. And color 495057. Okay, and then next we'll just target the text area. So form container text area, height of 170 pixels, margin bottom 2 rem, and then resize none. And that should do it for the contact section. So next we have the footer. So let's do start footer styles, end footer styles. And so first thing is the footer element. So footer background, we had a darker background color, so 333, padding of 8 rem on the top and bottom and 0 on the right and the left. and then a font color of 777. Bring this down a bit here. And then all the flex containers inside of the footer. Those are going to have a padding bottom of 6 rem, and then a border bottom of 1 pixel solid and 3 sevens. Next was all the H5s. So footer H5, color is white, margin bottom, 1 rem, font weight 300, and then the footer H5 with a class of follow us will have a margin top 1 rem, and then the footers hyphen about we'll say width of 47%, and then footer about, and then the paragraph tag inside of there will be a width of 65%. You scroll down a bit here. Next will be the quick links. So footer quick links. Each of those are going to have a width of 16%. And then footer quick links unordered list inside of there. That'll be list style type none. And then padding and margin both 0. And then footer quick links ULLI. So each of the list items inside, we're going to give a margin of 10 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 on the right and the left. Let's go ahead and copy this. And then we'll target the hyperlinks inside. So ULLIA. And the color will be 777. Text decoration, none. Now let me bring this down. Next one is going to be, actually let's go ahead and just copy this because we're going to add a hover effect. So LIA : hover. And this will be a color of white. Next will be the footer -subscribe, width of 35%, and then subscribe container. So hashtag subscribe container will be position relative, and then footer subscribe. So each of the input box in there will have a border radius 30 pixels, height 43 pixels. We're going to use our custom font again. So Roboto, Helvetica, sans serif, and then border 1 pixel solid, and then this is going to be 6C757D. Background color of transparent, font size 1 rem, padding 10 pixels, color is white, box sizing is border box, and the width is 80%. Let's bring this down as well. And then we got so let's just take a quick look of where we're at right now. So we just did the contact form, now we're on the footer. So here's those quick links, here's the subscribe container. So that's kind of what we're doing now. So we have this button that we need to style next. So underneath the input, we'll have footer button.right rounded, border top right radius 30 pixels, border bottom right radius also 30 pixels. Background will be that light blue 00AEF. Font size 16 pixels. Color will be black. Padding 10 pixels, 30 pixels, 9 pixels. Line height 1.5. Cursor is pointer. Remove the border, so border none, position absolute, right 0. That should do it for the button. And then let's go ahead and copy this because we're going to add some hover styles. So copy that, paste down here. So footer button with a class of right rounded. So on hover, we're going to set the background to white. Next, footer. Let me bring this up a bit. So footer, and then the element with a class of footer subscribe, and the unordered list inside of that. We're going to say list style type none, padding 0, margin 0. We could have probably put this as a global style rule. Just put all of the unordered lists on the entire page with a list style type of none and remove the padding and margin. That's probably a cleaner refactor that we can do. Next, we'll do footer.footer subscribe again, and then the list items inside. We're going to say display inline block, and then margin 0, 16 pixels. Scrolling down here, and then I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, and then we're going to target the first child. So colon first child, that's that first list item. We'll say margin left 0. Next, so footer subscribe again, ULLI, and then all of the hyperlinks inside, and we'll say text decoration none, and color 777. Let's go ahead and copy this, because we're going to add some hover effect. So at the very end, we'll do colon hover, and then set the color to white. And then next, let's target all the small tags in the footer. So footer small, margin top of 3 rem, font size 1 rem, display block, text align center, padding 0, 20 pixels, bring this down a bit. Next, all of the hyperlinks inside of the small tags. So that's going to be color 777, text decoration none, and then let's add the hover effect on all those hyperlinks. So footer small a hover, set the color to white. And that does it for the footer styles. So we're pretty much done with the CSS for larger screens. So now we need to work on our media queries, which is for when the screen starts breaking down to certain screen widths. So I'll just copy this comment here, and say start media queries, end media queries. And the first one we're going to do is, so to do a media query, you do @media, and then in parentheses you could specify like the widths that you want these style rules to take effect at. So let's do a max width of 991 pixels. And so everything in this block, all these style rules that we're about to write, will only be applied if the user's screen width is 991 pixels or smaller. So that's the idea there. So let's work on the logo. We're just going to do one small change to the logo on screen sizes of this, and we're going to say top 1 pixels. And then nav toggle, we're going to say display block. Scroll down a bit here. And then the unordered list inside of the nav tag, we're going to say position fixed, background white, right -100%. So it's kind of like off to the right of the screen. We can't really see it. Top 0, margin 0, padding 2 rem, height 100%, width 300 pixels, box sizing border box, box shadow 5 pixels, 0, 10 pixels, 3 pixels, and then 999. And so what we just did here was, for this size of screen, we just basically like restyled this navigation links. So I'll scroll back up here. If we go down to 991, what happens is it collapses down in here. And so what we did is we put all those links, right? So all of these links into a different container, which is kind of like sitting out here to the right side. We can't really see it until we click this hamburger menu. And then it slides on in. And of course we have to do our JavaScript in order to get that to work, but that's kind of the idea of what we just did with all that CSS. So next we'll do the close flyout, which was that last list item with an ID of close flyout. So this thing is going to have position absolute, right 2 rem, top 1.5 rem. We're going to put it in the top right corner of that container, and then font size 30 pixels, color 777, cursor pointer, display block, line height 1, margin 0. Let's scroll down a bit here. Next will be the list items inside of the unordered list in the nav. Each of those are going to be display block because they're going to sit one on top of the other. Margin 20 pixels and 0. And then let's just target the first child, so the first list item inside, and we're going to say margin top of 50 pixels. So bring that down a bit. Next will be all the hyperlinks inside of the list items. So font size of 20 pixels. We're going to increase that a bit since the screens are going to be smaller. And then the color will be 212529. And then let's target the active and on hover effect of these hyperlinks. So nav ul li a.active, copy that, and then lia colon hover, and then we're going to change it to that light blue 008EEF. And then next, property details. So those small tags in the property details section, we want to actually reduce the font size a bit on smaller screens, so 0.75 rem. And then the actions container, the buttons inside of that, so those share and favorite buttons, we want to reduce the padding. So 0.5 rem on the top and bottom, and 0.9 rem on the right and the left. And that's really it for this screen width of 991. So next one, the next breakpoint is going to be at a max width of 767 pixels. Scroll down a bit here, and so then this is basically saying only apply these styles to screens that are at a width of 767 pixels or less, right? So all the H1s, we're going to say font size of 2 rem. So we're going to bring down the font sizes of basically everything. So H2, we're going to reduce it down to font size of 1.75 rem. The H3s, font size of 1.2 rems. The paragraph tags, font size of 0.9 rem. And then all the containers, we're going to reduce the width of those down to 540 pixels instead of, I think they were 1140. So we'll reduce those down. And then property details, we're going to set this to a flex wrap of wrap. And we're going to let all those flex items in there wrap if they need to. So next we'll do the property details, address, container, and property details, property stats container. And these are going to both have a flex of 50%, so half of the horizontal width for each of those. Next, property details, property stats container. We'll say justify content flex end. So we're going to position all of its flex items to the right side of the property stats container. Next, property details, property stats container, padded inner container. So each of those, we're going to bring that padding inside down just a little bit. So 0.35 rem. So 0 on the top and bottom, and 0.35 rem of padding on the right and the left. Next, property details, property stats container, all the strong tags, and those are going to have a font size of 1 rem. So we're going to bring that down a little bit. And let's scroll down a little bit here. And then next, we're going to do property details, property stats container, year built. So that was that year built text. Set the margin left to 0. And then we're going to give it a flex basis of auto, which basically means just figure out your width based on your content, basically. Next would be the actions container. So property details dot actions container, justify content, center, and then flex 0, 0, 100%. Oops. And then also, actually, for the actions container, we're going to have a margin top of 0.5 rem. And so what we just did really there with all those styles is if we bring the width down to 767 or smaller, these things kind of collapse, right? Next, we're going to stick with the 767 breakpoint. We have more to do in there. So next, we're going to work on the property image sliders. So property image slider, the slick previous button, and then let's copy and paste that, and also the slick next. These are both going to have display none. And we have to do a hashtag or a exclamation point important to make sure that that takes effect. And so on smaller screens, we don't want there to be a right and a left arrow. We want the user to like swipe right, because they're going to be on a touch screen. So hide those previous and next buttons. Next, property image slider dot slick slide. So all the images in there, and then also the map and also the street. So all three of those, we need to adjust the height down to 390 pixels. So on smaller screens, really quick, we want each of these to be smaller in height, right? So all of these images, reduce the height of the map, reduce the height of the street view. That's kind of the idea there. That's why we targeted all three of those. So next, dot slider options container, the image fade and the span text inside of that, we're going to bring the font size down to 1 rem. And then next is property description, and the listed by container, the immediate div children inside of there, we're going to say font size of 0.9 rem. Next, property description, listed by container, and the button inside of there, set the margin top to 1 rem and the font size to 0.9 rem. Scroll down a bit, and then let's go to the next section, which is nearby similar homes, the container and the before pseudo element. We're going to adjust that a bit, so top 2 pixels, and then bring the font size down to 0.85 rem. And then let's do properties slider, the slick arrow. We're going to bring those down, font size of 0.85 rem as well. And scroll down a bit here. Next is property info details, the flex with a class of main details. And we're going to adjust the width of that to be 100%. So if you remember before, we had set the width of this to 60%. We're going to stretch it out to 100% on smaller screens, right? So with 100%, next would be property info details dot flex main details, and then the immediate div children inside of there. We'll give those a flex basis of 100%, so that they also stretch 100% of the screen. And so what that's doing, really quick, is if we bring this down, they're going to collapse down into 1 row each, and they span 100% of the width. Okay, so next is property info flex, and then all the immediate div children inside of there, and then also property info details. So those are 2 different parts of the page. Property info details dot flex and all of its div children. Those are going to be flex basis 100%, margin right 0. Okay, so next let's target the form container element, and that'll just be bring the padding down to 2 rem. Bring this down a bit. So now let's work on the footer on the smaller screen. So footer padding of 6 rem on the top and bottom and 0 on the right and the left. And then all of the flex containers inside of the footer are gonna do flex wrap, and then footer flex all the immediate div children are gonna be width 100%, and then margin top of 1 rem. And then footer flex all the div children, but just the first child. So just the first immediate div child inside of the flex containers, if that makes any sense. Margin top of 0. Bring this down a bit. And then footer about the paragraph tag. We'll do font size 1 rem, width 100%. And then footer subscribe the input inside of there, width of 90%. And then footer, the H5 tag with a class of follow us is going to be a margin top of 2 rem. And that should do it for the 767 breakpoints. And the next one is even smaller screens. So we'll do one more, or actually I think we have 2 more media queries. This one will be max width of 575 pixels. And we're going to do property details, padding top of 1 rem, property details, address container, we'll say flex of 65%, and then flex wrap. I'm going to copy property details here quite a bit, so let's copy this top one. We're going to keep typing this quite a bit here, so let's paste that a few times. The next one is going to be property stats container, so dot property stats container, and that'll be flex of 35%. Let's bring this down a bit here. The next one will be property details strong, so all the strong tags in there. Font size of 1 rem, and then next will be property stats container strong, so just the strong tags inside of the property stats container. We're going to bring those font size down even lower, so 0.85 rem. And then next, property stats container padded inner container, and we're going to realign these to the right, so text align right. Next one is going to be the property stats container price, and then let's just do it one more time. Property details, property stats container dot square feet. These are going to be flex 100%, and margin bottom of 6 pixels. Moving down, next one we're going to do, property stats container beds, margin bottom 6 pixels. And then let's bring this down a bit. And we have quite a bit more here, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue. Let's copy this property details again a few more times here. We got quite a bit to do on this. It's a very complicated part of the page. So next one will be similarly property stats container beds, and then the padded inner container inside of the beds tag. And then let's go ahead and just copy that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that last comma, and then also square feet. So come back here and change that to SQFT. So we're targeting the padded inner container in the beds and square feet tags, and then getting rid of the border on those two. Next, property stats container dot year built, and then so on the smaller screens, this is that one tag that we said is only going to be visible for larger screens. So we're going to make it hidden on smaller screens. So display none. And then next will be the address container year built small, and this is the one that's going to be hidden on large screens and visible on smaller screens. So flex bases, or flex 100%, and display block so that it is visible on the screen. Next is the actions container. So in here we're going to do margin top 0, oops, origin top is 0. Let's scroll down a bit here. And then let's see, so the next one here, we're going to do again actions container and the button inside of there. Font size of 13 pixels. And then property details, actions container, and then all the small tags, we're just going to hide those on smaller screens. And so really quick, what we're doing here is if we scroll back up to the top to the actions container, that's these two here. On smaller screens, what we're going to do, they're going to collapse down, and we're going to get rid of the favorite and share so that we can kind of conserve vertical spacing. So that's what's happening there. Yeah, so we don't need this anymore, so let's get rid of this last one that we copied. Next is going to be property image slider, slick slide image, and the map, and again the street. So we're going to reduce the height on these again. So height 330 pixels. Next is the slider options container image fade, and then the span, which has the text inside of it. So that'll be, we're going to push that down closer to the bottom edge of the image fade container. So bottom 0.25 rem, and then reduce the font size to 0.85 rem. And then bring this down a bit again. And then next will be property description and the flex container in there. We'll say flex wrap so that the listed by container can wrap underneath of the description. And then let's see here, property description, and then the element with a class of description, and then also property description, and then the listed by container. Both of those are going to set the flex basis to 100%. They're basically 100% width. Next, property description listed by container and all of its immediate div children. And then also, let's go ahead and copy that. So also property description listed by container and the button. So the immediate div children and the button are going to have a font size of 1.2 rem. And then finally, price history container, flex box inside of there will justify the content to be spaced between. And that's it for that breakpoint. So the next one we're going to do really quick is max width of 500 pixels. So let's scroll down a bit here. Let's do at media, max width 550 pixels. And then in here, so property image slider, slick slide image, and then the map, and then the street. Oops, what happened there? Fix that spacing. We're going to bring the height down again, so 290 pixel height for those three containers. And then properties slider, a slick arrow. We're going to adjust the top position to negative 40 pixels. And then nearby similar homes, the container before, we're going to also adjust the position of that to top of positive 40 pixels. So let's scroll down a bit here. And then after that, let's target the contact and reduce the padding to 4 rem top and bottom and 0 on the right and the left. Then the H2 inside of the contact, we're going to say margin bottom of 2 rem, and then the form container padding of 1.5 rem, and the footer padding of 4 rem 0. Okay, and then almost done here. One more very small media query to do. So let's do at media max width 400 pixels, so even smaller screens. So the nav unordered list inside of that, let's do width 200 pixels. And then the property image slider dot slick slide image, the map and the street are going to be a height of 245 pixels. So bring that down even smaller. The walk score container, the strong tags in there, we want to bring, we want to set the flex basis of those to 120 pixels. Let me scroll down here, and then the walk score container hyperlinks, Set the font size to 1.2 rem. And then walk score container I tags, font size of 0.85 rem. And that does it for the styles. Congratulations if you stuck with me through all of that. We just wrote over 1,000 lines of pure CSS. So that's a little crazy. We're not done yet though. We still have to do the JavaScript, which is not nearly as involved. So the JavaScript part will be much quicker. All right, so next let's work on the JavaScript. And so the first thing we're going to do, if I go back to the prototype here, is we're going to start taking a look at the Google Map and Panoramic Street View. So, although before that, let's create a new folder. So come over here, let's create a new folder called JS. This is going to hold our JavaScript file. So in that new folder, let's create a file called script.js. And then, so the first thing we're going to do, so to put a Google Map in your website, there's a pretty easy instructions from Google. So if we go over here and just search add a Google Map to your website, just search that on Google and you can see this developers.google.com adding a Google Map with a marker to your website. So if we click on that, this has some pretty straightforward instructions on kind of how to do that. Feel free to read through it if you like, but basically they have a code sample here, which will do exactly that. The only thing is that you'll need to get your own Google Maps API key, which means you'll have to create an account on the Google Cloud and go through those steps to enable this API key. I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial, but if you have any problems, you can leave a comment in the video and I can go into that further. But so basically, if we take a look at what they're doing here, they basically have this div with an ID of map, and we've already put that into our code earlier on in the video when we were doing the HTML. So all we need now is the JavaScript code. So you can see that we have a script tag here and a closing script tag here. So we'll just copy everything inside of there. So this whole function init map. So we're going to copy that. Come over here. We'll just paste that down here. And then we don't want it to be going to this location. So we'll update it to just someplace in San Francisco. And then I'm going to also update these comments a little bit. So the location, this will just be the location to load the map at. And then we're going to do, and let's use updated JavaScript. So const, and then we'll just call this San Francisco. And then I have the latitude and longitude, which you can find pretty easily. There's probably various ways to look this up. 37.7575. And then longitude is negative 122.4377. That's the location of just some random place in San Francisco. And really quick, if you want to see kind of how I did that, there's probably better ways, but if you go to maps.google.com and put in some location, say like San Francisco, this is just wherever it takes you there. Up here in the URL, they give you the latitude, longitude here. So that's one way. You can put in whatever address and they should give you the latitude and longitude. So you can just pull that from the URL. That's one way of doing it. There's probably other ways as well. So coming back into here, so we have our location, San Francisco. And we'll just update this. The map centered at San Francisco. Oops, San Francisco. And then const map equals new google.maps.map. Document element by ID map. And then instead of the zoom of 4, we want it to be zoomed in a little bit more. Let's change that to 12 and then update the location here to San Francisco. So center the map basically on this latitude and longitude. And then the marker positioned at, we'll say San Francisco. And again, update the position here to say San Francisco. And again, let's update these variables to use const. It's a little bit more appropriate. So const map and const marker. And that should do it for that. We'll have to write a little bit more JavaScript to kind of call this function on page load and on click when they click the map icon. So the next thing was the street view. So if we come back to Google here, or if we, let's just go back. Actually, I apologize. Let's go forward one more time. There was actually one other thing. We have to copy this this script here. And this is actually just pulling in the Google Maps JavaScript code. And again, you'll have to add your API key here to actually get your map to work. And then also just kind of be careful if you're hosting this on like a real website publicly available and you put your API key here, that's not really good practice, because then anybody who visits your page can basically just like view the code source and pull your API key, and then they can use your API key. So if you are going to do this, make sure to add restrictions to your API key in your Google Cloud dashboard. And there's instructions for all that. So I'm going to copy all this. And basically, this is going to have to go in our HTML file. So back over here in property detail.html, basically just all the way at the bottom underneath the body tag here, we'll just paste that in. I'll go ahead and paste my API key in here a little bit later on so that we can see it all working, but I'm going to leave it like this for now. And then while we're at it, let's go ahead and add a link to our script tag that we're also writing. So up above this, we'll create a script tag. Source is js/script.js. There we go. And so that basically just attaches our script tag into our HTML page there. So back in our script file, let's go back to Google here, and let's say add Google Street View to your website. Just Google search that, and then again, developers.google.com, Street View for web platform. So if we click on that, we can come in here, and this is kind of what we want to add, right? And they have some examples here. Over here to the left, if you click on Street View in the Maps JavaScript API, if you click on that, they have some code examples here. And this is a little bit more complicated because there's quite a bit of options you can do with the Street View. I mean, there's quite a bit of options you can do with the map view as well. But so there's various things here. So I had to kind of read through this to just pull out exactly what we needed for this website. So basically what we want is the Street View panorama. So I'm just going to copy this panorama thing all the way down to the closing tag here, or the closing parentheses. So copy that whole panorama, and then coming back into our code. So up above here, let's create a function. Well, first of all, I'll put a comment and just say initialize and add street view map function, and we'll just say init street view. So we'll create a function, and then let's go ahead and paste that code into here. And then I'll fix the indentation a little bit. And then up above, let's say in a comment, the location to load the map at, or sorry, location to load the street view at. And then we're going to use the exact same location. So let's just copy this, paste that there, and then let's also paste it one more time. And then we're going to say const street div, and let's just pull a reference. So I'll delete all this. Let's pull a reference to that div. So document.get element by ID, and we just had the ID of street. And then down here, again, let's change this to a const. It's a little bit more appropriate. So const panorama equals new google.maps.streetviewpanorama. And then the first argument to this function is just some HTML element. So we have ours up here. So let's just replace all of this with street div. And then we have an object here. And the object kind of tells it like where to load the map at, right? So obviously we'll change this to San Francisco. So that's where we want it to load. And then the POV, we actually don't really need this. So there's default, which is perfectly fine for our web page. So we can get rid of all that, and we can basically just say street div and then the object position San Francisco. Get rid of that comma there. Now we have these two initialization functions that we're going to need to eventually call, right? So up above here, let's add some space. We're going to write some more JavaScript that's going to kind of call those out. So with jQuery, we can do an onReady function, which is just $ parentheses and then function. And this is basically like run all this code once the page is finished loading. So we'll put all this in here, and I'll just say save references to often used DOM elements, and this way we only need to pull these elements one time, and we're just going to use jQuery to pull these. So const, we're going to need the image slider. Whoops, image slider, and this is going to be $, and then in single quotes hashtag, because we're going to grab it by the ID, property image slider, and let's paste that a few more times. Oops, paste that a few more times. The next one is map, and the next one is street. And this one is just hashtag map, and this one is hashtag street. And then let's add some click events. So open up the $, and then we're gonna add a click event to the image view. So that, and then .on click, and then we'll do a arrow function. Whoops. And then in the arrow function, so when they click to view the image slider, we're gonna hide the map, right? And we're gonna also hide the street view if it's visible. One of those two would probably be visible at this point, so let's just put hide on both of them. And then image slider, we're gonna say .show to make that one visible. And then let's just copy this 2 more times because we basically have 2 more. So image view, and then the next is map view. And this one will basically be, so let's put the image slider up top, and we're gonna say hide the image slider. And then we're gonna say hide the street, but let's do map.show to make the map visible. And we're gonna do the exact same thing with this, except we're gonna show the street. So image slider .hide, map.hide, and then street.show. And then there's one other thing that we need to do when, and we need to update this. I almost forgot. So this should be street view. So we're adding a click event to the street view option. And so we do image slider.hide, map.hide, and street.show. But we should also call our function down here, init street view. So let's go ahead and call that. So init street view, let's do that up at the very top. So right when they click on it, we're going to initialize that street view at the location that we gave it. And then we're going to make sure that the appropriate div is visible on the page to the user. And the reason that we don't have to init the map is because on page load, when it loads this script that we copied, this actually has a callback that will invoke that function for us automatically, init map. So once this script loads, it's going to run our function here, init map, only one time. So that will load once and we're good. But the street view, we should initialize it once they click on the options. Okay, so next is the ask a question button. When they click on this, we want it to scroll down to the contact form. So add a click event to that with an arrow function. So when this is clicked, let's say contact div position. So let's find the vertical position of the contact form all the way at the bottom of the page. So document element by ID contact.offset top, and that'll give us the amount of pixels it is from the top of the screen. And then we'll just say window.scroll, and this takes an object with some options. So top will be our contact div position, and let's give it plus 30 more for just a little bit more spacing. And then left 0, we don't want to scroll horizontally, and then the behavior should be a smooth scroll. Put some semicolons there, and then so that should do so what we just did there, if just quickly show in our prototype, when they click this ask a question, we smooth scroll them down here to the contact form. So that's the JavaScript to handle that functionality there. Next one is the property image sliders. So we need to use that slick slider plugin. So let's grab a reference to property image slider, and then to use the slick plugin, and I'll have a link to it down in the description of kind of the documentation if you want to read into it to kind of learn how it works. But basically you just say .slick. This takes an object of kind of like configuration options. And so what we want to do for that top image slider is we want to have this slides to show should be just one at a time, right? Because we have just kind of have one in the middle of the page. And then slides to scroll as well. So just scroll one at a time when the user clicks right and left, right? And then center mode, we're going to be true. Variable width is true because not all of our images have the exact same width, right? We have some portrait, some landscape. And then infinite is also true. And this kind of means that like it will scroll through the list of images infinitely, right? So once you get to the last image, which is our 9th image, and you scroll next again, it's going to go back to the first image. And then the previous arrow, so prev arrow, and we can put in some HTML here. So let's give it a hyperlink tag with the href, the hashtag, and then class is going to be slick arrow and slick prev. and then we'll put a span inside. And we're going to use font awesome. So FA chevron / or hyphen left. Close the span tag and close the A tag. And then basically copy and paste that. And then we're going to do next arrow. Almost the exact same thing except slick arrow. Instead of slick prev, let's do slick next. And then instead of FA chevron left, it'll be FA chevron right. And we can get rid of that last comma at the end there. And that should do it for that slider. The plugin will do all the heavy lifting. The next one is our nearby homes property slider. So let's use jQuery again. We're going to grab that by its ID. So properties slider dot slick, passing in that same kind of object. This one we're going to do slides to show is going to be 4. So on large screens we're going to show 4 at a time. But slides to scroll, we'll still just scroll 1 at a time as they click through. Prev arrow, similarly we're going to do hyperlink. Href equals hashtag, class is slick arrow and slick prev, and we'll just put in the text previous because we don't have an icon for these ones. And then basically copy paste again. This will be next arrow, and then slick arrow, slick next, and instead of previous we'll just put next. And then we want this one to be responsive, right? So we can also pass in a responsive option, which basically just takes an array of objects for each breakpoint, right? Each screen width. So let me scroll down a bit here. The first screen width is going to be 1100. So let's open up an object and we'll say breakpoint 1100. So for screen widths that are 1100 or less, we'll do settings, another object. And this is going to be slides to show 3 instead of the 4, and slides to scroll we'll still just do 1, and then infinite true. And then so the next breakpoint, let's open up another object. So breakpoint will be 767, so even smaller screens. We're going to do more configuration options here. So slides to show here are going to be 2. Slides to scroll are going to still be 1. Infinite is still going to be true. And we're good there. And then one more breakpoint. So comma, another object. Bring this down. Breakpoint 530. Settings, another object. And this will be slides to show 1. Slides to scroll, also 1. And then infinite true. And that should do it for that slider. So let's end that with a semicolon there. Bring this down a bit. And then so the next functionality we need to do is the nav menu, right? So like on smaller screens, really quick, we have this and you click on it and this thing flies out and you click this to close it. So let's work on that functionality next. So up here, underneath what we just finished doing, we're going to say const nav menu equals hashtag nav menu. So we're going to grab a reference to that DOM element with jQuery. And now let's add some click events. So let's grab the nav toggle dot on click arrow function and then nav menu dot CSS. So we're going to update the CSS of this DOM element and set the right position to 0, because by default it's like negative 100%, which makes it off to the right side of the screen where you can't see it. So when they click on that hamburger menu, we're going to update the right so that it flies into the user's view. That's what's going on there. We can actually just copy this, just paste it down here, and then the next will be the close flyout button. So let's delete all this and let's grab the close flyout again by its ID. So hashtag close -flyout dot on click nav menu dot CSS right, and we're going to put it back to the negative 100%. So when they close it, let's just fly it back out to the right side of the screen, off the screen. And then the last thing we need to do is basically, if we pull this up one more time, when we click this, while this is open, if we click anywhere else on the screen, it hides it, right? So we can close it by clicking this close button or clicking anywhere else on the screen, except obviously within here. So if you click in here, it shouldn't close it, right? So in order to do that, we're basically going to add a click event to everything on the screen except the flyout menu. So document.onClick. So basically just, this is going to register a click event for everywhere on the screen. And then this is the event object. And then so do an arrow function. So we'll say const target equals, and let's grab a reference to the target of whatever was clicked on, right? So e.target. And so this is basically saying, like, we don't know what the user is really clicking on because we're putting a click event to the entire screen, right? So this right here will tell us exactly which element the user clicked on. So once we have that, then we can put some if logic here. And this is going to look a little bit confusing, but so if, and then we'll do exclamation point for not, and I'm going to do inner parentheses. So inside of here, we're going to say target.closest, and then we'll do nav toggle dot length greater than 0, or so two pipes, target dot closest nav menu dot length greater than 0. If that's the case, then we're going to say nav menu dot css right negative 100%. So close that flyout menu. And so this looks really complicated. But all it's saying here is if the user clicked anywhere on the screen except the nav menu or the nav toggle, then we're going to close the flyout. That's all that's kind of doing there. Put a semicolon there, clean up some of the spacing, and that should do it for the script here. So we should actually be able to test out the page now. So let me pull this open and let's look at our prototype. So I'll come back over here to our prototype. Refresh. Okay, so it's looking better. Let me pull this back to a larger screen. So our header is coming into play. Everything is looking good. Our sliders are now working, right? Everything else looks good. I don't think we missed anything. Footer looks good. So come back up to the top here. If we click on map right here, right, it says, oops, something went wrong, right? And so I haven't put in my API key yet. So if you don't have your API key, this is what you're going to see. And then Street View isn't even going to load, right? So we need to put in the API key in order to get these to work. Okay, so I went ahead and put in my API key. I'm not going to show it on the video, but now if I come back up here, let's do a reload. And if we click on map, now we can see that it loads to San Francisco, the location that we gave it, the latitude and longitude. And then if we click on Street View, now we can see a view of the street of some random address. And we can scroll around. So this is a fully interactive Google panoramic view, right? You can like click to go up and down the street. Clicking back, we can get back to the images, right? And then let's pull up the responsive view here. So let's go to the mobile, do a refresh. And now we can see that it's fully responsive. We can click and drag the images. We click on map, get our smaller map view and street view as well. Let's go back and make sure that we didn't miss anything. Ask a question. We click on that. It scrolls us down to the contact form. That looks good. Footer looks good. Everything looks pretty clean on mobile screens. Just double checking that I didn't have any typos or anything. This slider is now just showing one item at a time. Looking good. So yeah, it looks like we're good to go there. If I did miss anything, please leave it in the comments. I'll be happy to help out. And this was a pretty lengthy, involved, larger project. So congratulations if you made it all the way through this video. Leave a comment down below. I'd always like to hear if this helped anybody. So thanks, and look out for the next one.